Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all, especially Hegdeji and his team. Today we have presenting chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita. We have Pannagaji and Arunaji. Pannagaji was a student of Dr. Hegde's hospital, Vedanta classes before moving to Hubli in 2014. And she's currently the Environmental and Social Nodal Officer at Hubli Dharwad Smart City Limited. And Arunaji is also a student of Vedanta for the past 5 years. And she's been an interior designer for more than 30 years. She's also a classically based singer. So I suppose we're going to have some very nice chanting today. But looking forward.
Can I bring the light up?
Mute, please. Andy, mute.
Looking forward to the wisdom from Pannagaji and Arunaji. So over to you all. Hegdeji.
Thank you very much, Ramesh. Thank you, Sajani. It's amazing how we have finished 15 chapters and we have come to the summary of the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It's been a wonderful experience. Each of those who've been allotted a particular chapter have given their very best to make a nice summary of the chapter. If you will remember, at the end of the last week when we studied the 15th chapter, Sri Krishna concluded with Yomam eva asammoda janati purushottam. Sri Krishna seems to reach a climax in the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita in the 15th chapter, where he says, Yomam eva asammodaha janati purushottam. Those who are able to discover who is this Purushottama, they experience complete fulfillment in life. And that was the whole objective of the Bhagavad Gita. But then Sri Krishna uses a word in the next verse where he says, Anaga. Anaga means one who has no blemish, one who's free from all sins. Suddenly Krishna realizes, I'm giving something so sacred, so pure, but are you ready to receive it? So he gives 2 more chapters which helps us to prepare to receive this great teaching. That means that there is the devil in me, there is the divine in me, and that is the topic for today, Daivi Sampat and Asuri Sampat. And we have both Pannaga and Aruna who will be covering this chapter. Over to you, Pannaga and Aruna.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, sir. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Sadashiva Samaramha Shankaracharya Madhyama Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. With a deep sense of gratitude to just 1 minute, sir. I don't know. With a deep sense of gratitude to our gurus, Pujya Swami Paramathanandaji and Dr. Timapa Hegde sir, we begin today's session on the 16th chapter, Daivasura Sampat Vibhaga Yogaha. Next slide. The Bhagavad Gita is Moksha Shastra, giving us a roadmap to realize the highest Purushartha or the goal of life. It contains the greatest knowledge that I am not this limited body and mind, but the pure, eternal, all-pervading consciousness. Krishna began this teaching in chapter 2 and effectively concludes it in the 15th chapter, Purushottama Yoga, which we learned last week. As we must have realized, this knowledge is extremely profound. It needs a very refined and evolved mind to understand it. Given our deep-rooted ignorance about our true nature, our minds need to go through a thorough preparation process for the knowledge to bring about the expected transformation from a suffering samsari to a gnani. Next slide. How do we refine our minds or achieve Gnana Yogyata? Through Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and the practice of values. Lord Krishna gives us the teaching of Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga in the Prathama and Madhyama Shatkams of the Gita, respectively. Now he dedicates 2 entire chapters, the 16th and the 17th chapter, to speak about values. They are called Daivi Sampat and Asuri Sampat in the 16th chapter. Daivi values, named after the Devas, are the higher values which help us achieve a healthy mind. Asuri values of the Asuras, the lower values contributing to our mental health or sickness.
Giving us the right mind to buy.
Both values are called Sampat because they are the inner wealth of our minds, giving us the right mindset to buy or to achieve our goals. Next slide. With this background, let us enter the chapter proper. There are 24 verses in this chapter, and we will be speaking for about 45 minutes. I will present the first 12 verses, and Madam Aruna will do the next 12. Atha Shodashodhyayah Shri Bhagavanuvacha Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhihi Gnana Yoga Vyavasthitihi Danam Damascha Yagnascha Swadhyayastapa Arjavam. Lord Krishna presents 9 Daivi Sampat in this opening verse. Let us see the first 4 in the next slide. The first virtue is Abhayam. Abhayam means courage and self-confidence. This quality is important because a spiritual journey is a long and difficult one. Sri Krishna says in the 7th chapter that Manushyanam Sahasreshu Kaschid Yatati Siddhaye. Only 1 in 1,000 is interested in spiritual growth because it requires a very mature and confident mind to pursue spiritual progress over and above material wealth. What is Sattva Samshuddhihi? Sattva here means Antakaranam or the mind. Sattva Samshuddhihi hence is purity of mind. This purity is achieved by consciously entertaining only healthy positive thoughts while nipping the negative thoughts in the bud. Gnana Yoga Vyavasthitihi is the committed pursuit of Gnana Yoga through long Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasana. The pursuit of Gnana Yoga and leading a life of values must go hand in hand for spiritual progress. Danam, we know, is giving charity. Yagna, Dana, and Tapas are often mentioned together in our scriptures. Danam helps us develop detachment from our worldly possessions and gives us a good feeling of abundance. Importantly, it removes the Lobha dosha and benefits those less fortunate than us. Swami Paramarthanandaji tells us to start this practice by giving what we don't need and then progress to giving what we need to people who need it more than us. We move on to Damaha in the next slide. Damaha is sense control, Indriya Nigraha. Sense control does not mean suppression of our sense organs, because suppression becomes oppression and cannot be sustained. Damaha is the voluntary and conscious directing of our sense organs towards those objects and activities that are conducive to our spiritual journey. Yagnaha is worship of the Lord. Now, there are 2 types of worship. The first is a ritualistic worship in the form of puja, homa, or japa. But since we have only limited time to spend on this type of worship, Lord Krishna says we must follow Karma Yoga. That is dedication of every action of ours to the Lord, making our entire day a yagna. Swadhyayana is the self-study of our scriptures. It is one of the Pancha Mahayagnas. Swadhyayana is chanting of prayers and shlokas and understanding their meaning with the help of a guru. Practiced every day, it has a powerful compounding effect in purifying our minds. Sri Krishna mentions tapaha next. Tapaha is voluntarily and deliberately going through a painful experience for toughening one's physical and mental personality. It helps develop our tolerance, which helps us bear life's difficulties with minimum suffering. As it is said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Arjavam is the integration and alignment of our thoughts, words, and action, creating a harmonious personality. This harmony tremendously increases our focus on any task we're doing, helping us utilize our full potential. We now enter the second verse. Ahimsa satyam tyaga shantirapayshunam daya bhuteshvalo lupvam mardavam hrira chapalam. Next slide. The first value we see here is ahimsa. In our day-to-day life, we are often hurt not by physical abuse, but by what people say or think about us. Hence, ahimsa includes not hurting others at all three levels, the kayika, vachika, and manasika. However, under exceptional circumstances, when non-violent methods don't work to stop injustice, ahimsa becomes necessary. Just like Sri Krishna directs Arjuna to fight the war. Satyam is truthfulness. It also implies complete avoidance of untruths. If speaking the truth can hurt the other person, especially our near and dear ones, we must cushion the impact by speaking gently and sandwiching it between truthful, pleasant words. Akrodhaha is being able to handle anger. Shouting or hitting is the expression of anger. Anger by itself is a powerful emotion indicating some strong emotional pain. We must try to understand the root cause and resolve it at the mind and intellect level rather than impulsively letting it out at the verbal or physical level. This is akrodhaha. Tyaga or renunciation is the next virtue. It is of two types. The first is external renunciation, which is taking up sannyasa. The second is internal renunciation, also called vairagya. It is the understanding that God is the owner and we are temporary custodians of all that we claim as our own. They can be taken away from us at any time. This readiness to lose anything or anyone is called tyagaha. Shantihi, we all know, means equanimity or samatvam of the mind. This mental poise is necessary because any disturbance in our mind clouds our intellect, leading to suboptimal decisions. The next value is a rare word, apaishunam. It means not publicizing the defects of other people, a behavior not uncommon. Lord Krishna instructs us to speak about the good we find in others and not gloat about our own, for our own spiritual growth. What is daya bhuteshu? Daya is compassion. Bhuteshu includes all living beings. Sri Krishna doesn't limit our compassion towards only humans, but to all flora and fauna, encouraging us to become more alert and sensitive to our surroundings. Another virtue not often heard is aloluktvam. It is not yielding to temptation of specific sense objects that can cause excessive harm, like alcohol, tobacco, or drugs. We must be very careful in the initial stages that we are beginning to get addicted to it and willfully turn away. Mardavam means gentleness in handling people, in handling things, in simply being respectful and polite in all our interactions. Hrihi is modesty or a healthy sense of shame. It prevents us from doing actions that we may regret later. The last value in this verse is achapalam. Chapalam means restlessness. Restlessness is primarily a mental condition which many times manifests in the body, consciously or subconsciously, like the tapping of our feet, fidgeting with our fingers or clothes, biting our nails. Achapalam is staying relaxed in both the mind and body. Next slide, sir. We now enter the third and final verse where Krishna mentions the last 6 Daivi Sampat. These qualities set us up for success, not only in the spiritual plane, but also in the material plane. Teja Kshama Dhriti Shaucham Adroho Nati Manita Bhavanti Sampadam Daivim Abhijatasya Bharata. The first virtue of this verse is Tejaha. Tejaha here doesn't mean splendor or effulgence. It means not becoming a victim of exploitation. The Lord tells us we must be gentle and tolerant, but never become a doormat. Just as we uphold dharma, we must protect ourselves from adharma. Shama is the absence of anger. We learned that akrodha is the management of anger by allowing it to pass through our rational thinking filter. Shama is anger not arising at all. It may sound unattainable, but Adi Shankaracharya says anger often is the result of unmet expectations. So when we reduce our expectations, we give less scope for anger to arise. Dhritihi is willpower or fortitude, the capacity to continue a sadhana despite obstacles and temptations. It is derived from dhr dhatu, meaning to hold on. This applies to all walks of life and especially to the difficult journey that a seeker undertakes. Shaucham is cleanliness or orderliness. It must start from the most important place, our minds, and then move outward to our body, our house, our roads, and even our city. We do all that is in our control to implement Shaucham. The penultimate value that is mentioned is adroha, that is not even thinking about harming or cheating anyone. We discard these thoughts only when they are just a seed of a thought. And gradually, such thoughts stop occurring to us. This is adroha. Finally, Sri Krishna concludes the Daivi qualities with Nati Manita, that is also Abhimana, freedom from pride and conceit, which is essentially forbidden for a seeker. For only when we bow down to our gurus with all humility can knowledge flow from them to us. Thus, Lord Krishna has listed 26 values for us to imbibe for our mental health and spiritual growth. They are not new to us, yet somewhere it becomes difficult to follow them 100%. Hence, the Lord, being the greatest Acharya, devotes an entire chapter to explaining the Daivi Sampat and their opposite values, the Asuri Sampat, which we will learn about in verse 4. Next slide. Dambho darpo bhimanascha Krodha parushyameva cha Agnanam cha bhijatasya Partha sampadamasurim. Sri Krishna introduces the attributes of a person born with purely materialistic values in a nutshell here. Dambaha is pretension or hypocrisy. Darpaha is arrogance and disrespect for others. Abhimana is vanity or pride. There is a difference between Darpaha and Abhimanaha. Darpaha is externally expressed arrogance, that is at the Kaika or Vachika level, while Abhimana is the unexpressed thought at the Manasika level. Then comes Krodha or anger. Sir, I just like to stop here for 1 minute. The current has gone off, so I will just shift my laptop to a different place. Sorry, just 1 second.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead. Aruna, would you like to say something until that time? Or will we wait?
Ma'am, you can unmute.
Thank you. She's explaining Asuri Sampat. Of course, all the qualities that are being listed, and they are very, very exhaustive, obviously, to a very, very subtle level. And as we go down in this, as we continue along in this chapter, we're going to see Bhagwan Krishna actually go step by step by step towards the fall from the top to the lowest form of spiritual degradation. And it's amazing how Bhagwan has described all these steps of degradation, which is the worst kind of Asuri Sampat, starting from the basic greed to the last, where it's absolutely degrading. So it's very, very interesting, and it's very thought-provoking to know that Bhagwan has thought of has lectured Arjuna on all these steps going down into degradation, and see from where a person of Asuri Sampat, from where to where someone can go. I think Pannaga is ready right now, so I'll mute myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Aruna.
Sorry. Then comes Krodha or anger. Parushyam is rudeness. And finally, Agnanam. Here, Agnanam means ignorance of dharma, moral and ethics. We must remember that in the 16th and 17th chapter, Sri Krishna does not talk about self-knowledge or Atmagnanam. Now that the Lord has listed both the Daivi and Asuri Sampat, he proclaims to Arjuna in verse 5 that these are the only two types of people in this world. Let us summarize their differences in this slide. Yamadharmaraya calls them the Shreyas and Preyas groups in the Kathopanishad. The Shreyas group are those with Daivi Sampat, have Dharma and Moksha as their primary goals. They practice a spiritual value system of Daivi Sampat. They lead a disciplined lifestyle as prescribed by the Vedas, and therefore can attain moksha after the study of Jnana Yoga. The Preyas group have Artha and Kama as their primary goals. They practice a lower value system of Asuri Sampat, lead their lives purely according to their Ragadvesha, and therefore stagnate spiritually. That's why they remain in the bondage of samsara, birth after birth. Arjuna must have looked worried when Krishna described these two types of people. Hence, the Lord reassures him, telling him not to grieve, ma shucha, because Arjuna has displayed Daivi Sampat throughout his past actions and complete surrender to the Lord. Since Arjuna represents all of us Gita students, we can be rest assured too that we have more Daivi Sampat than Asuri. It should now be our endeavor to nourish these values. Next slide. From verse 7 onwards, Lord Krishna comes down heavily on the purely materialistic Asuri people. He says they do not know what is to be done, pravritim, what is not to be done, nivritim. They have neither purity or cleanliness, that is shaucham, nor religious discipline, acharaha, and they have no truthfulness also, that is satyam. We must understand an important point here. All human beings by birth or by nature are materialistic, drawn to artha and kama. A child does not know what is good or bad for it. It acts on impulse according to its nature or prakriti, based on inherent likes and dislikes. Hence, it is the duty of the mother to teach her child the right actions and values. Vedas are like a mother. They prescribe beneficial actions called vidhi or pravritim, like getting up early in the morning, sincerely performing our duty, and remembering the Lord through our daily transactions. Vedas also prohibit certain behaviors called nishedha or nivritim, which are harmful to our spiritual progress. thus to transform from being a materialistic Prakruta Purusha to a spiritual Samskruta Purusha, effectively becoming reborn as a new refined human. Hence, in this verse, Sri Krishna chastises those who do not make this course correction and choose to remain unrefined. Next slide. In verse 8, he continues to describe the Asuri Sampat of the Prakruta Purusha. In this verse, Satyam means Veda Pramanam. So, Asatyam means these Asuri people are like Nastikas, neither believing in the Vedas, nor in God, nor in religion. They do not acknowledge the role of Dharma in maintaining the moral order of the world. So immature is their understanding of God that they believe the world purely evolved by scientific laws, and living beings were created by the union of male, para, apara, and female, apara, due to desire, kama haitukam, effectively negating the role of God as the creator of this glorious universe. Next slide. In verses 9 and 10, Sri Krishna tells us why such non-believers are a danger to society at large. Swamiji gives an example how. Just like the world of color is not available to a visually impaired person, so is the world of spirituality and God inaccessible to these non-believers because their limited mind cannot comprehend anything beyond the experience of their available sense organs. Such people are called Alpa Buddhayaha. They are lost spiritually, Nashta Atmanaha. In their relentless pursuit of Artha and Kama, they resort to immoral and violent methods, Ugra Karmanaha. These acts violate Dharma, leading to the eventual destruction of the world, Jagatha Kshayaha. The Mahabharata war and all our wars are a result of the actions of such extreme personalities who are filled with hate, and they are called Rakshasas or Dvesha Pradhana people, who we will learn
Really?
in later verses. Next slide. In the next two verses, Lord Krishna tells us the wrong motions an Asuri Sampat person has with regard to happiness. In verse 11, he says, giving to deep and lifelong anxiety and holding the enjoyment of sense objects as the highest goal, they are convinced in their belief that this is the highest limit of joy. Next slide. Most people pursue Artha and Kama because their fruits can be enjoyed immediately in this life, maybe even tomorrow, whereas the fruits of Dharma and Moksha may never accrue in our current lifetime also. Sri Krishna flags this tendency because material pleasures can never give us lasting happiness. They in fact create atrupti, discontentment, bandhaha, bondage, and are dukkha mishritaha. They breed stress and anxiety either by their gain or loss. The spiritual person revels in only one thing, the Atma. Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. Next slide. Sri Krishna says these people are bound, baddhaha, by the ropes of countless attachments, asha pashaha. They are always vulnerable and disturbed and intensely experience kama and krodha. In this unbalanced mental state, they work harder and harder, ihante, to amass more wealth, artha sanchayan, by unrighteous means, anyayena. They do this only for the sake of enjoyment and sense pleasures, kama bhogartham. A materialistic society creates role models out of such people, corrupting the whole society to strive only for such false ideals. With this, I conclude my portion of the 16th chapter. Now, I request Madam Aruna to throw light on verses 13 to 24 of this most useful chapter on values. Thank you, Hari Om.
Thank you, Pannaga. So before we go to verse 13, there's a little addition here. Swami Paramarthananda makes a subdivision in Asuri Sampat itself. He says that there is a Rakshasi Sampat also along with Asuri Sampat. Now, Asuri Sampat is Raga Pradhan, that is a life based on Raga or attachment. Here, a person is totally selfish and may not appear to be hurting anyone immediately, but the selfishness is based on wanting everything for himself or herself. So the damage is done, it's not apparent, but in the long run, the selfish person takes more from society than he or she gives, and this results in disharmony eventually. On the other hand, the Rakshasi Sampat drives a person who has got what he calls Dvesha Pradhan, or someone who is driven by hatred, Dvesha. Such a person causes immediate harm to the society. His actions are based on hatred and violent dislike. The Asuri Sampat person is dominated by Rajas in character, and the Rakshasi Sampat person is dominated by Tamas. But both are variants of extreme materialism. The thought patterns of both are a kind of obsession with getting more and more of what they want. Next slide, please. Now let us look at verse 13. Idamadhyamaya labdham mimam prapsase manoratham idamasti idamapi me bhavishyati punardhanam. Now, continuing on this description, Bhagwan Krishna goes on step by step towards the final degradation, describing the downfall of those with Asuri Sampat and Rakshasi Sampat. So each verse takes us to a lower and lower rung of understanding. Of what an Asuri Sampat person has. So in this verse, Bhagwan says that people are busy, their philosophy being all about money. And in the next 3 verses, Bhagwan talks about the thought process of this totally obsessed material person. And how does this go in this verse 13? Idam madhyamaya labdham. So this person is thinking, this much wealth has been earned by me, calculating the amount he or she possesses, thinking constantly of how much it will increase, projecting and daydreaming. A karma yogi thinks in terms of how much he or she has given to society, but not the person who hoards and hoards everything, whose mind revolves completely around how much more he or she will have. Punardhanam. This is like the first step of degradation. Next slide, please. Now, verse 14 comes to the second level of degradation. Bhagwan continues that this first level turns to a state of immense inordinate greed, where one who has had a success in accumulating wealth desires to vanquish the others in order to make himself or herself the richest and therefore the most powerful, beating all the rivals, so to speak. We see big conglomerate multinational companies trying to do that. Says that at first there may be some guilt associated with this, like I shouldn't be doing this. But as time goes by, the conscience is stilled and it becomes a state of having no feelings at all and whatsoever, so that the end justifies the means. Therefore, aparanapi, such a person thinks, I will destroy others, whoever stands in my way. And in this manner, the person thinks, aham bhogi, I am the one who will enjoy all the wealth, the glory, and be the most powerful, Balwan. I am the strongest in the world, and I am the only one, therefore, who is the happiest, Sukhi, enjoying all the wealth, power, fame, etc. And this is the goal of a person in this state of Asuri Sampat. Next slide, please. In verse 15, Bhagwan continues this thought process of the materialistic person. But let us be clear that this is not a condemnation of materialism per se. In order to survive in the world, we have to depend on money and material goods for our main sustenance. Even monks have a need for this. But what Bhagwan is saying, that these extreme patterns of thought, which are totally drowned in materialistic desire, is not at all healthy. And that leads one further down the ladder, leading to degradation, spiritual ruin, along with terrible karmic consequences. So Bhagwan goes on to say in this verse 15, that such a person thinks that Arya Asmi, I am the richest. Then I belong to a superior noble family. He or she talks of illustrious ancestors. Then kaha anya asti sadrisha maya. He or she asks, who is equal to me in this world? Then there is that yakshe, means I will do yajnas and pujas and whatever is good for the society, but done out of arrogance to show off, not that this person has any belief in God. Also, the person thinks, dasyami, I will give in charity, and when I do this, I will be glorified even more. I'll get more publicity and more honor will come to me. Finally, Bhagavan Krishna says, vimohitaha. Such people are digging their own spiritual grave. They are totally confused and deluded. The ignorance gets perpetuated, and this is a very, very bad thing. Next slide, please. Continuing on this path of delusion, Aneka Chitta Vibhranta, carried away, lost in the above mentioned, what I've just mentioned, the above obsessive thought patterns. Chitta means thought patterns, Aneka, varieties of them, Vibhranta, lost in that. Mohajala Samavritaha, they are encircled by a network of moha or delusion. The false idea that money and possessions and everything else give the ultimate happiness and security in life, and that this is the pinnacle, the highest goal or the highest form of life. In the next line, Prasakta Kama Bhogeshu, Swami, next slide, not previous slide, please. The next line, Prasakta Kama Bhogeshu, Swami Paramarthananda says that such a society which is totally materialistic uses all its resources for the creation of more and more objects for sensual pleasures only. Kama Bhogeshu, the enjoyment of sense objects. Swamiji even gives the example that even medical advancement can be pushed to the direction of creating a youthful body. To do what? For the enjoyment of more sense objects, enjoying more of these things. And this leads to Narake Patanti. That is, Bhagwan is not referring to Naraka or hell as a particular place, but this leads to the hell. And this is any spiritually inferior life is called Naraka. It is a fall, perhaps even into an animal birth. Therefore, the jiva who has not utilized this human birth for spiritual growth may get thrown into an animal birth. But more of that in a later verse. Next slide, please. In this verse 17, where Bhagavan Krishna goes into a very extensive description of the consequences of one who has immense arrogance, vanity, caused by accumulation of wealth, fame, fortune, etc., etc. He says, humility and devotion disappear. Arrogance and Ishvara Bhakti cannot coexist. So this person has sycophants around them, and every glorification that they do is actually very deadly. Such people become egotistic, they are power hungry, full of karma, material desires, and full of krodha also, with the knowledge that they can get away with anything. Atma Sambhavitaha, fully involved in their own glory. Such people, Lord Krishna described as stabdaha, stiff-necked and never bending, not even in a namaskar. The arrogance makes them so stiff, unable to bend to anything. Dhanamana madanvitaha, full of arrogance. They do a lot of pujas, but pujas yajante nama yajneste, doing pujas, but not done with any humility. Pujas done, rituals done with no heart, but with dambhena, that is pomp and show, with no respect to the sanctity of the mantras. So Bhagavan Krishna says this is avidhi purvakam, violating the rules and regulations of the Shastras. Next slide, please. Continuing on the same vein, going down and down the ladder of degradation, Bhagavan says that a person full of ahankara or bloated ego, balam, power, darpam, arrogance, kama, desire, krodha, anger, samshritaha, all these dominate the life of a person. Completely obsessed, they're obsessed with all this. And this leads to a non-devotional swabhava or nature to such an extent that mam pradvishvante, they begin to hate the Lord also, hate anything to do with the scriptures or anything to do with religion. Next slide, please. Verse 19, Bhagwan continues further that those who dislike me, spirituality disappears from their life and surroundings. They therefore become krura, mean, naradaman, very, very mean and rude, and full of deterioration. Therefore, Bhagwan says, I throw them into narakaha, now, or situations which are devoid of spirituality. Now, let us understand that Ishvara or God is not prejudiced and arbitrary, throwing people here and there and punishing them. Bhagwan is a karma phala data only parceling out the fruit of actions by which these people with asuri sampat are pushed into births where there is no spiritual element. It's completely devoid of God. This is naraka. This is the fate of those who are so twisted and warped by their own egos that they are actually rakshasas. Next slide, please. Now, Bhagwan says that these asuric people, once we have reached the lowest form of degradation, but Bhagwan says that these asuric people, once they go on the downward slide, they get into a very vicious cycle, very, very difficult to get out of. Swamiji says that there are two main reasons for this. One is that such a person, the free will is not used properly, it is not used dharmically. Therefore, on one hand, the actions taken create a papam. Secondly, anything that is done repeatedly creates a vasana or a habit. So you have vasanas that are conducive and not conducive to spiritual growth. Asuric people develop addictions and habits that enslave the mind, and this is carried forth into the next janma. Mudhaha. They are deluded, and not only in this birth, but janmani, birth after birth. Mam aprapya eva. They go further away from God and descend into lower and lower births. So remember, the consequences of any papam can go through many births. It doesn't have to be in only one birth. And such mental perceptions, which have been described in all the earlier verses, create samskaras which get stronger as they are acted upon. Next slide, please. So, Bhagwan, the entire Asuri Sampat, Bhagwan is condensing into three basic problems. He says there are three gateways to hell or Naraka, so to speak. As I said earlier, Naraka is anything which is a barrier to spiritual growth. It doesn't mean an actual place of hell or whatever, or to any barrier to spiritual growth and self-destruction. So the three basic gates of hell, Bhagavan Krishna described as kama, desire, krodha, anger, and lobha, greed. Now, he has said the same thing in verse 37 of chapter 3. Kama esha krodha esha rajo guna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidyena miha vairinam. So Sri Krishna says that for one to give up kama, we have to transform the kama also. And how can this be done? The transformation of kama can be done in 3 steps. The lowest is the tamasic form of kama or desire, which is any desire that is illegal, immoral, which harms others and which takes you down spiritually, destroying others, cheating, etc. Give these up, Bhagwan says, and transform them into the Rajasic Kama. Now, what is Rajasic Kama? Those are legitimate desires, but materialistic ones, like money or entertainment, which is done in a dharmic way, the legitimate enjoyment of sense pleasures. Now, this doesn't harm anyone, but it does not contribute to spiritual growth either. So, if a person wanting spiritual growth has to move from Rajasic Kama to Sattvic Kama, this transformation has to take place. Here, the desire for Rajasic Kama recedes and is slowly replaced by a desire for Chitta Shuddhi, for listening to the scriptures, for listening to bhajan or whatever, and trying to be a little more spiritual, and finally a desire for moksha. But all these 3 forms of tamasic, Rajasic, and Sattvic Kama are also forms of bondage. So Swami Paramathananda says we need to go beyond Sattvic Kama into what he calls Badita Kama, which is a non-binding desire. It means having a Sattvic desire, but if things don't go right, then you accept everything as Ishvara Prasada. Ishvara Prasada. Kama obstructed leads to anger, krodha, and kama fulfilled leads to greed or lobha. So these have to be transformed over time. Kama is the seed for all this. So our guidance would be the Shastras, doing things in a dharmic way. Next slide, please. Verse 22. One who shuns these three gateways of hell, which have been mentioned in the previous verse, is getting onto the spiritual path. So what does a person have to do? Up till now, we have looked at Asuri Sampat. So this is the conversion of Kama, Krodha and Lobha into the Sattvic form of Kama, converting Asuri Sampat into Daivi Sampat, which Pannaga has explained earlier. A person of Daivi Sampat also has desire, but has desire for Viveka, Vairagya, and that must be very strong. Now, Bhagwan doesn't really specify how to accomplish this conversion from Asuric to Daivi Sampat. He only says that it has to be done. But the path to this conversion is the path of Dharma. And the highest Dharma is Ahimsa, the least trouble, the least damage caused in this world. Once a person has turned, the spiritual path of Chitta Shuddhi can begin, concentrating more on internal growth rather than external possessions and status. And therefore, Karma Yoga becomes important. And then, as the desire for spiritual growth happens, there comes a guru who will guide a person into Vedanta, the Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasana. Next slide, please. Until verse 21, we have seen a detailed description of Asuri Sampat. We know that a life based on Raga Dvesha has no chance of moksha at all. But after that, Bhagwan goes beyond mere conversion from Asuri Sampat to Daivi Sampat, but talks about further stages in the path to liberation. A good ethical character is not a guarantee for moksha. It is merely a stepping stone. An ethical life alone does not remove ignorance. It is necessary, but it is not the ultimate goal. If ignorance has to go away, one must know one's true self. Then spiritual sadhana is a must. Then only does a person have a chance to attain moksha, param gatim. Bhagwan says that the only way to reach this is to follow his teachings. Shastra vidhi mutsrijya, to stick to a dharmic way of life. And if a person does not make use of this life, then vartate kamakarataha and lives a life of raga dvesha, there's little chance of getting chitta shuddhi or jnana yogyata. In fact, as time goes by, even the materialistic pleasures which appeal greatly due to the law of diminishing returns appeal less and less as time goes by. Next slide, please. Therefore, in conclusion, Tasmat Shastram, following the Shastras and the guidance for leading life of Karya Vyavasthitam, norms of do's and don'ts, that is the way ahead, which is dealt with in the Veda Purva Bhaga. Learn what is right and wrong, and then change from Asuri and Rakshasi Sampat to Daivi Sampat. Learn the scriptures and then hopefully get moksha. In a nutshell, next slide. The way forward is to have a balanced frame of mind, not swayed by impulses, rightfully earn wealth through Karma Yoga, make time for Vedantic scriptures for Panchamahayajna, and give importance to Dharma and Moksha more than Artha and Kama. Next slide, please. Om Tat Sat iti Srimad Bhagvadgita Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishnarjuna Samvade Daiva Sura Sampat Vibhaga Yoga Nama Shodashodhyayaha. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aruna ji and Pannaga. It was really very nice. The chanting was so good. The slides were excellent. And in the short while, it was an excellent summary. Now I hand it over to Dr. Hegde ji, after which it'll be open for questions. Dr. Hegde?
You have summed up very well, Sajani. You have said all that I could say. You have done, and you know, when the brief is given, and if you do it as expected, then we are also happy. So this chapter has been nicely covered. You know, the problem about all these things about values is not that we do not know about them, but we have to have that tremendous amount of courage to be authentic, to be able to follow them. So that is the big significance of these chapters, because if spiritual wisdom has to make a difference in your life, it has to be clubbed with values. That is what Shri Krishna will be saying in this chapter very strongly, and it will continue into the next chapter also. With that, I'll leave it open for discussion.
Thank you. And now, kindly unmute yourself and ask questions. Anyone wants to ask a question, please unmute yourself. Okay, any comments, suggestions, anything?
Yeah, I perhaps have a comment.
Go ahead, Ramesh.
I think I must say that as a designer myself, what I've observed is the presentation has really been top-notch. In fact, I would say this is one of the best presentations, and this format is very easy to understand because one thing is, of course, it is very clearly presented. We have the shloka, and after which the salient points have been brought out very well. The layout and the overall quality of the PPT is makes it extremely easy for people to understand. So I must really say thank you so much, Pannaga ji and Archana ji.
Thank you, Ramesh. And any questions from anyone? No? I don't get any questions.
There is a technical one that I wanted to ask.
Go ahead.
In one of the shlokas, let me see which one. I've just jotted all the things down. In one of the shlokas, Krishna is talking about the asuric aspects, and he said a person, a soul that is practicing many of these, the three gateways to hell, will repeatedly be thrown into the womb of into an asuric womb, and they will normally, as a consequence of that, gather more and more karmas. Seems a little harsh for the source to say that, but I think probably it has got more to do with the rule of karma than divine mercy. What would your thoughts be on that, Pannaga ji and Aruna ji?
Well, it is kind of harsh. I agree. It is. I mean, to say that everyone will be thrown into lower births and all that. Remember that again, as I mentioned earlier, it is God is parceling out the karma. He's not actually throwing people and saying, okay, you become an elephant or you become an ant or something like that. It's more to do with whatever your karma, that itself, it's an karma is a kind of ruthless kind of continuum where you get back what you have done. So that is the thing. It's not God saying, I make this person an ant in his next life, not like that. But that is like extreme degradation. That's what I wanted to make clear. Like the Asuri Sampat is going down from just being materialistic to going down all the way to condemning God and to the slide downward, which is very, very obvious in the latter half of this chapter. So that is the lowest form of Asuri Sampat, like total condemnation, total degradation, total condemnation. So everything is, this is not black and white. There is a combination always, but I think Sri Krishna is just describing it. It's kind of dramatic actually, and describing it going down so that where the worst part of the degradation hits, where the last part is. I hope I didn't confuse you anymore.
Not at all. In fact, Arunaji, I was just thinking on those lines. We see many of these people practicing these three gateways to hell. Perhaps we also are practicing it in a sometimes obvious, but many times not so obvious in subtle manner. So it is said that there's a mini Satya Yuga, or there's a Satya Yuga around the corner. Maybe by 2036 it'll be fully visible. So before that, there'll be a lot of this degradation happening, and we will go through the lowest ebb before we rise up from out of there, which is why so many people are now becoming interested in spirituality. So would that mean that the world at the moment is going through some such process from which we have to put in our intentions and efforts together to pull up our consciousness individually and as a collective humanity as well?
Definitely. I mean, Kali Yuga has been said. I know I've been hearing also that Satya Yuga is around the corner. I'm not really sure, because sometimes they say it's Kali Yuga is still another 400,000 years or something away. So is this a medium Satya Yuga, a small section of it, which is going to be nice, but it's still going to go from bad to worse, So it's hard to, because this is going into aeons and, more than centuries. So it's very difficult to say, but then we see perhaps movements of spirituality and de-spirituality also in the world. It's always the world is always balanced. That's what some saints say, that there is always a balance in the world, but then we tend to see something. I couldn't answer the question of whether the Satya Yuga is around the corner. I have no idea. But if there may be a time when there is a better society for some time at least. But perhaps, I don't know, I think it's more an individual thing, like we should be on the spiritual path more, think on those lines more, rather than, looking at it collectively, because we really can't influence everybody in the world. You can influence a few people maybe, but the world goes the way it has to. And even that has the hand of God in it. It's not as if we are doing everything.
So to be able to accept what is, but to do the best nonetheless from our individual.
Exactly. I mean, do your duty, do the best. I mean, even Arjuna was told to fight and kill, which is not nice actually. But then that is doing your duty, and that is the world has to go on. It goes on the way it has to.
Thank you, Arunaji.
And anything else?
Good evening,
Anyone?
ma'am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks for the enriching session, ma'am. So in one of the shlokas, it said that the three gateways to hell are anger, greed, and desire. So in our worldly life, we use this to some extent, like desire. If we are pursuing some goals, we desire to have some outcome. And anger, sometimes we get anger with ourselves that how we are not pursuing. And even in our spiritual life, sometimes we do desire. So is it the degree we have to manage, or absolutely no?
No, you can't give up desire. I mean, if I go to the airport, I expect the plane to take off at a certain time. No, that is not a bad desire. But yes, the desire is what he explained about, Swamiji has explained about tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic desire. So there are gradations in that. There is gradation in anger also. I mean, Bhagwan Krishna got angry also and told Arjuna, you have to kill. Now that is you can say that that violence is also a form of anger. But in general, it's the tamasic style of karma, which is doing harm to others. That should be avoided. We have to move from tamas to rajas and then sattvic. So sattvic is also a desire. We cannot live without desires. I mean, I'm thirsty, I will drink water. That is a desire. But the extent to which you harm something, or what level it is sattvic, rajas, tamas, that is the binding thing. And how much you are identified with it, because the identification of the body, that this is me, I have done this, and that identification of the body is where we fall into the trap of not being spiritual, let's say. So there is a disidentification. You have to do your duty. Everybody has to. I have to get up in the morning and send the kids to school or whatever. But it's the identification. You do it like, they say you use it like you use a car. The car it takes you from place A to place B. But you are not the car. So similarly, you step back and say, I have to do these things, but I am not the body. And then you continue to do what you have to do. But you cannot say that there cannot be any desire, there cannot be, we can't all become mice and live, doesn't work that way. There's a famous parable of Sri Ramakrishna also about a snake. I hope I'm not taking too much time. About a snake who was beaten by some children. And the saint came and said, the snake was actually biting people. And then some children came and the saint came and then told the snake, look, you shouldn't be biting people and all this is not correct. So then some children came and beat the snake. And the saint came again and then told the snake. The snake said, see, I listened to you and I didn't bite people and now I'm getting beaten. So Sri Ramakrishna said that the saint told the cobra or the snake, I told you not to bite, but I didn't tell you not to hiss. So that form of anger, that is fine. Protection of yourself is it's a difficult it's an understanding, and we have to kind of examine our thoughts. That is the crux of this whole teaching: is examine your thoughts and know what is driving you. Then you become.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Sorry for taking so long.
Not at all. In fact, I remember Arunaji, our yoga master would say, don't become angry, but in some situations you may have to show anger just to match the frequency of the environment, and then you can bring it down to a calmer, more equipoised state. You have to match the frequency externally, so you show anger, not become angry.
Yeah, you don't become the desire, you don't become the anger, you don't become the greed.
Yes, it's open for more questions. Any questions, anyone? Yes, Meena?
Yes, and both the speakers have done very excellent job, and they have expressed and explained each Asuri or Sattvic gunas very beautifully. I think a big thank you for them, and it's really beautiful to hear the values that we should imbibe and which we should not. So that's very nice, and I thank them both.
Thanks, Meena.
Thank you, Meena. Anyone else? Any comments, suggestions, anything? If it's not questions, anything else? No?
There's a doubt that's coming up with that one slide which spoke about Tejas, one of the divine qualities.
Yes.
So, let me just open this slide. It says not being a victim of exploitation. When we experience this in life, in many some situations where we feel exploited, there is resentment, there is a feeling of being a victim.
Going on, they are just, see, they want to spend time till long time.
Dolly, you please mute yourself, Dolly.
Huh?
Kindly mute
yourself.
Sandhya.
So when we talk about Tejas and to avoid exploitation, we have to balance it also with an ability to not get taken over by anger. If you feel exploited, sometimes you can get taken over by frustration or anger. How best can we balance that in such a way that we don't get exploited? And that is something that sometimes I find tough. But at the same time, we keep that equipoise within.
Yeah, this Sri Krishna is very clear when he tells us to be tolerant, to be gentle, but then not be treated as a doormat and not be exploited. So the key is the key to maintaining our poise is to sort of distance ourselves from the argument or from the action that is going on. So if you are able to take a step back, which Swamiji calls neighborization of our problem. So how we have a lot of things, a lot of advice to give our neighbors, but then when it comes to our own reactions, we are so absorbed and into them that we are unable to think rationally. So if you are just able to take a step back and think rationally as to what is it that is actually causing the problem. If it is something, if the situation cannot be resolved using calm means or using negotiation, can we see if we can step away from the situation altogether? One way. Or the second way would be, if you can put certain mental filter. So irrespective of what is said, Swamiji says that that we have to be like a flower when we are handling others, when we are doing good to others, but we have to become like a diamond, as hard as a diamond, to what others are saying or doing to us. So if it is not going to benefit us in any way, so we just have to close our minds to those thoughts, and again follow this test of the frequency, intensity and reaction. So if we are able to maintain our calm, or even if we get agitated, how quickly are we able to recognize that we are getting agitated and come back to a more balanced state of mind, even if it happens slowly. And these things will take a very, very long time to happen. And I say this from experience with small children, and a lot of times I'm shouting and screaming. So it takes a long time, and we just have to keep doing our spiritual practices, keep listening to spiritual talks, and slowly it definitely is sinking in, and it will manifest in due course of time.
So I would think that summarize what you said. One is to detach yourself from your own lower identity, so that you don't experience any pain because of whatever is going on. And the other one is the best long-term way is to strengthen your sadhana, so that the tools get built up within in due course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Other questions? No. I don't think there are any questions. So, Ramesh, we can have the formal vote of thanks, followed by the Loka Samstha. Over to you.
Thank you, Sajani. Well, I think for me, the biggest takeaway from this chapter was that, when we were told that the Bhagavad-Gita is really a roadmap for self-realization, in short. And that's what I got from this chapter, the biggest takeaway. And it was amazing. I think this chapter has been presented in a very simple and lucid manner, but the sheer effectiveness of this presentation, the mastery behind it, was the humility and the simplicity with which both the speakers, Pannaga ji and Aruna ji, spoke today, for which we are very grateful. Very equipoised and divine, and I could feel the divinity with which they presented, and it was all the points. It was a very practical chapter. In fact, many of the much of the advice that's given in the chapter, amazingly, though Krishna spoke it